an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we are. It's the 21st day of June. Welcome in. It's Now and Next. Dave Trafford here for Story Studio Network. And I know I said I was going to do this yesterday, but you can hear my voice. It's recovering. I pretty much lost my voice midday Monday. So, trying to fumble through Tuesday was a bit of a pain. And this is sort of the leftovers of the COVID. Feeling fine otherwise. But it's that bit of a scratchy throat. Kind of somewhere half between a head cold and a chest cold. That's what it is right now. So, and I'm coming up to 10 days since we tested positive. We're okay. We're okay. Yeah. Anyway, so needless to say, there was no point in my struggling through yesterday and trying to get the podcast out there. So here we are, and it's probably worthwhile that we waited because in this issue of Now and Next, as you will know, Toronto is heading to the polls. Well, some of us are. On the 26th day of June. And, you know, those who show up get to put their X on the ballot and have some say in who the next mayor of the city of Toronto is going to be. And I've said this a couple of times already. Earlier in the week, we talked to Dave Hardy, and he and his crew are really pushing to get the vote out, particularly in Scarborough. 25% of the population of Toronto lives in Scarborough. It's a significant part of the city, obviously, but it's also underserved. It's not really recognized in terms of its issues, its problems. It's the city so much is focused on everything from Midtown South. And I would hazard to say, to be kind, maybe between Bayview and Bathurst. Right? If you live outside of that, your issues are diluted. Because so much of the focus around transportation, homelessness, etc., all in that area. But we talked at length. It was a good chat. You should go and check it out. It was the Monday edition of Now and Next this week. But in there, Dave Hardy, without waving a flag for any one candidate, pretty much said what we needed in terms of a mayor. And I thought, it's time to break this thing down. We've got 7 candidates who are at the top, and I use that phrase loosely, of the list of wannabe mayors. They're the most likely, if at all, to be elected. And you've heard me talk about the efficacy of the polls, that in fact, what media has done by so constantly and persistently reporting on polls is only ingrained name recognition for those who are on the ballot. Olivia Chow's name rose to the top of the polling before she was even declared a candidate. Why? Because somebody put the poll out and media jumped all over it. And I have to laugh. The media will say, well, it's all about name recognition. But you ask them to name anybody beyond the top 7 candidates and who these people are. And people in the media who should know who they are based on their history in this city haven't a clue. They haven't a clue. I never heard of this guy. Right? And I realize that the average voter doesn't need to, but it's media's job to sort through, sift through, talk about the history and the context. It's not to sit on your hands and wait and see what happens. There's a function here for journalism, and that's not to put a thumb on the scale at all. There's a function for journalism to lay out exactly what it would mean if, fill in the blank, or to be elected mayor. And I got to give them credit. The folks at the Star, the Toronto Star, have done a really good job at that. I saw some bitching and moaning today online because they've done these 360 interviews, right? I question the 360 method, but anyway, I'll give them credit for actually doing some deeper work on the candidates. But somebody's moaning because Mark Saunders' 360 interview hasn't been published yet. Well, we're still a week out. But you've got Anthony Fury and Anna Bilau and Olivia Chow. And who else is it? Oh, Josh Matlow, Brad Bradford. So, these stories, and I call them interviews. They're not really interviews. They're 360 reviews of the candidate themselves. And when they do the interview, they're doing it from a 360 perspective. That is to say, people that worked with them, people that worked for them, people that they worked for, all that kind of 360 view that you might do. So the question then becomes, what is it that Toronto needs in the short and medium term? And I would say short term is the rest of this term, which gives about 3.5 years, give or take, in the mandate. And then maybe the next term. Because I think depending on who actually gets elected, the next mayor may only serve 3.5 years. And I'll get into that, based on the character and the quality of the candidates on the list. So let's start with Olivia Chow. Chow clearly thinks she's going to win this thing. Watch what she's doing. She's not talking to anybody in a serious way in terms of media. She's avoiding the talk shows on the radio. Why would she jump in there? She's turning her nose up at some debates now. Again, every day, 2 or 3 debates. I don't blame her. But taking that step back a full week ahead of the election suggests to me that they're sitting on polling that says, okay, we're just going to ride this through to the end. We're good. We're fine. It's the internal polling that matters. And it's not some robocall poll, right? This would be more in-depth polling. More of the kind that John Wright would describe it. Maru Public Opinion. So I'm pretty sure that based on that, they're sure, yeah, she's going to waltz into the mayor's chair. This conversation is not about who should be mayor, who will win. This conversation is about what does Toronto need. And Toronto doesn't really need an Olivia Chow mayor right now. And I'll tell you, for a bunch of reasons. First, Chow is just going to aggravate what's going on at Queen's Park. I know. There's all kinds of reason to be annoyed, aggravated by Queen's Park. But the mayor of this city is going to have to sit down face to face with Doug Ford and not just get along, but move the ball forward, up the field. And they need to do it together. Clearly, the premier is not on Team Chow. He's hammered a Mark Saunders sign into his front lawn. Now, I'm not quite sure of the wisdom of doing that as the premier of the province, just in terms of the optics. Next Tuesday, Mayor Chow goes knocking on the door at Queen's Park, which is usually what happens a day or two after. Yeah, that's not going to... The optics are just all bad to start with. So that relationship is not going to be a good one. First, only reinforced by the fact that Chow is prepared to raise taxes, but only after she goes to the other levels of government and demands money. Yeah, that's a longer process. That's not a short-term fix. And given the posture and the tenor of that conversation right off the bat, not likely to really be all that productive. I'm just putting it out there. And this is not about her politics, about her policy, or anything else. She has drawn a line in the sand here that's going to make it very difficult for City Hall, Queen's Park, Parliament Hill to some degree, to actually be on the same page to pull Toronto out of the $1 billion hole it's in, $1.5 billion actually, and stand it up and get it moving in the right direction. So that's one thing. The other side is, it won't quite be the Rob Ford days. I mean, because I don't think there'll be the kind of crack cocaine and, drunken disorderly behavior going on. But in terms of being able to get support on council, the mayor, short of using the strong mayor powers, which she says she won't, is going to have to be able to pull everybody together on council to move an agenda forward. There's more than a third of the councillors who have endorsed other candidates. 2 have endorsed Chow. Relatively rookie members of council, not with a whole lot of sway or clout. The fact that she is going to have a real challenge moving anything through council also poses a problem. Right now, you need a mayor that can command the council. Right? So, will she win? Yeah, it looks like she might. Is it what Toronto needs? Probably not. Will she serve a second term? I would hazard to say that Olivia Chow, if in fact she wins, will not be reelected as mayor. 1. Okay, so let's move on. Mark Saunders has the endorsement of the premier. And it would appear as to be, with the exception of Stephen Holiday, the Etobicoke city councillor, the only 2 people who are really coming out strongly in favor of Mark Saunders. I should actually say, I heard Tim Hudak today saying he's going to vote for Mark Saunders. But Saunders, as much and all as he's been able to manage, the $1 billion budget for the police service, and then you can fill in the blank in terms of how well or not he has done that, he's just not cut out to do this. There's not a chance. He will be seen as the Doug Ford's guy, right? And that's the last thing you need. We need somebody who is Toronto's mayor. Period. He has been lackluster in the campaign, has problems just even punching above his weight in terms of managing the debates, getting any kind of momentum going. But if you listen to him, all he is saying is that he's the only one that can save us from Olivia Chow and bike lanes. That's not what Toronto needs. We need a mayor who is actually going to rework, reimagine, reinvent the relationship that this city has with the province and the federal government. That's long term for sure. But it's got to start on day one. And all of that stuff comes into it, and whether it's housing, poverty reduction, transit, all of those things fall into place when we do that. There's very little in Mark Saunders' conversation rhetoric platform that suggests he's putting any of that first. The security vis-a-vis, he talks about the violence on the subways and so on, and I think that's a legitimate and a real worry and a real concern. But to get real stability, you need a house. You need a place to live. Housing has to be that. Period. So Saunders, he was never cut out to do this. He was pushed into it. He's a reluctant candidate. In fact, I might suggest that Olivia falls into the same boat. Brad Bradford was one of the ones who was first out of the gate and has only proven that he is unready to serve. He is just not ready. Got a few good ideas? Yep. This whole thing about, tendering contracts, yeah, it makes you scratch your head if we can save a few $100 million a year. Okay, that's not a bad idea. But he keeps coming back as if he's the new guy, the outsider. He's been on council for a full term. And before that worked in the planner's office. So he has a whole lot of baggage in there that he's going to have to deal with because he was on the job when much of what we're talking about now was approved by council or planners. Now, they've all got that. They've all got baggage. For sure, they've all got baggage. And we're not going to get to a point where we ever have a candidate or a mayor who doesn't have baggage. But he has proven to be, I think, a little immature in his approach to this. Could he be mayor one day? I don't know. There are days when I watch him perform and I think, his performance in the spotlight running for mayor, I wonder whether or not what the people in his ward and the beaches think of him. Like, they're getting a pretty good look at the guy now. More so than they would have when he was running for city council back in the fall. Has this campaign actually maybe hurt him a little bit in terms of people's perception of Brad Bradford? Don't know that, but it's a question worth asking. And we should probably dig into it a little bit more and see if, in fact, what is the perception now, before and after? And Brad Bradford would still have a bit of an issue, again, commanding council. Josh Matlow has been running for mayor for years. Caught flat-footed by just the same as everyone else when John Tory announced back in February that he was stepping down. And, of course, he and Bradford were probably two who were ready to run, but 3.5 years from now. So Matlow actually has some pretty smart ideas. He's all over the files. He gets it. He goes deep. I think for the most part, he is genuinely and generally really committed to his specific ward in Midtown. He has some issue around the accusations that he's kind of done a NIMBY thing when they were trying to put more density in and around his neighborhood, and he complained about it, had the building reduced in its size, so on. Okay, yeah, but that's a city councilor taking care of his ward. The biggest problem that Josh Matlow has is not a lot of warmth on council, and that's putting it mildly for Councillor Matlow. And same problem that Olivia has with Queen's Park and maybe even Parliament Hill to some degree, and that's a lesser issue. The real rubber hitting the road is going to happen at Queen's Park for City Hall. And the next mayor needs to be able to manage that. Josh Matlow's history with Doug Ford goes back and deeper than Olivia's does in a very negative way. There is no love lost there. And I'm not suggesting that, for a second, that needs to be the sole criteria. But if we want to get anything done, the mayor of this city needs to be able to sit down and have a mature, thoughtful, productive conversation and initiate and execute the ideas that are going to move this city forward. And, quite frankly, the province. Can you picture Josh and Doug sitting down and getting that done? No. And similarly, Matlow has come up with, he keeps putting things like you were to tear down the east end of the Gardiner Expressway. Council voted that down years ago, and he keeps bringing it back, and he keeps losing. And he keeps saying he's going to do it as mayor. He's not going to do it as mayor. He's not going to have the support. He will not be able to coalesce enough votes to even consider it. And unless he uses his strong mayor powers, it doesn't happen. Says he won't. He's handcuffed right out of the gate. We don't need the drama from him. Mitzi Hunter been a bit of a flop on this campaign. I thought that perhaps she was going to be the one that was going to, kind of ride in from the suburbs, from Scarborough, and really bang the drum for people. I got to give her credit, for the most part, when you look into what she's doing. And, they all throw numbers around all the time. Hundreds of millions of thises and that's, and we're going to shift that to there. And, and I appreciate that they're doing that. But smarter people than I have looked at what she's doing and the numbers that she's throwing around and saying, this makes sense in terms of a costed plan. A costed plan. Now, in terms of the increases in taxes, doesn't quite jive. But at least she's, and I got to give credit to Matlow. He's willing to say, we need to increase the taxes here in the city of Toronto to begin to make ourselves whole. Pull up our own bootstraps. Mitzi Hunter has been saying something similar, and in fact has a better plan in terms of it being costed, if you will, but just can't seem to articulate what it is she would do as the mayor. How are we going to negotiate our conversation with Queen's Park? Where is it we're going to, all of them to some degree are saying, with the exception of Anthony Furey and Saunders, are saying, we're going to go and demand more money from other levels of government and then fill in the blank, raise taxes, move forward with programs, whatever. That's not a plan. That's hoping. And again, it comes back to the relationship between the mayor and the premier, pretty much, and how that's going to play out. Right. So Hunter has probably got a whole lot of good ideas there, but has not been able to cut through. And I'm not certain that we need a mayor in Toronto who can't at least light a fire under the conversation. I even as closely as I'm watching this, I'm having a hard time pointing to anything that really excites me about, okay, this is what we can expect from Mayor Hunter. Don't see it. Anthony Furey, heard him on the radio yesterday morning, talking to John Moore on News Talk 1010, columnist for a long time with the Sun Media. And I just simply reposted, I read the article, and I reposted the article that the Toronto Sun, or Star rather, had written on Furey. And he was properly asked about some of the things that he commented on as a pundit in the media and as a columnist. Now, it doesn't matter what you think about them. Doesn't matter whether you think he was outrageous on the right or he was whatever. I'll leave that to you. You read them yourself. But all I did was post it with the headline and everything from the Toronto Star. And I spent more time muting ignorant comments that were attached to it because somehow I was anti-Anthony Furey. But it poses the question, why is he not wanting to talk about his past career? We would question Mark Saunders on his past career. We've been all over Olivia Chow for her past career. Mitzi Hunter, can't shake her past career as a politician in this city, working for Civic Action. They all get asked about it. It's a little precious for Anthony Furey to avoid it. And then somebody online saying, they wanted him, they should have had him sit down with an editorial board. Well, no, all the other candidates got the same kind of 360 coverage. Period. The irony in all of that is that the reaction that I got on Twitter actually reflected some of the question marks and concerns expressed in that 360 piece in the Star that said, yeah, you know what? He leans this way, and this is the kind of mayor that we might get. Well, if the reaction on, and I admittedly, it was Twitter, but on social media, was anything like what we would get in terms of those supporting a Mayor Fury. Not quite sure that that's primetime stuff. I know you can't judge them by people who react on Twitter, but there's a bit of irony in there when you watch how virulent the response was and some of the questions that were brought up in the article that he didn't want to talk about. So a little gimmicky in terms of how he was doing things, and don't necessarily question his commitment to the city, because I think they've all made a huge commitment by putting their name on the ballot. And the last one I'm looking at is Anna Bilow. Anna Bilow's got some issues. There's no question. I mean, the whole question of, moving the Science Center down to Ontario Place drew some traction off the bat, but a lot of pushback. Good idea, bad idea? Are you in bed with, the Ford government? Was their idea to begin with? Well, got news for you. The Science Center move has been in conversations for a while, well before this election was ever considered. In fact, it would have been part of last fall's election if anybody had brought it up. Nobody did. So right out of the gate, there was something there. On the other hand, Bilow was smart enough to come out and say, I would like to do this because we can build all these houses. And that is at the heart of where we need to kind of look at this, moving the city forward. Affordable housing, more density. Good idea. Now, the problem that she faces is all this gets conflated into the Therme Spa that's going down at Ontario Place, seemingly unopposed, with the exception of some protesters, and God love him, Michael Hall at Next Magazine is all over it, and I don't disagree with him. I mean, I'm thinking that we need to really look at what we're doing with that space down there. But this move by Bilow actually kind of puts her in a place where people, so you're in favor of privatizing right? And that's a huge part of it. But on the other hand, look at what she's done with council. She's got 7 or 8 city councilors who've endorsed her almost immediately, including the deputy mayor. That's 25-ish% of council right there. And it's going to go a long way in terms of a mayor being able to pull votes together, move an agenda forward, get the job done. And I also think, the idea hasn't just been about complaining about Queen's Park and Doug Ford. Whether you like it or not, she's put sort of stakes on the table and said, here's the issue that I'm going to actually take to Queen's Park. They should upload the DVP and the gardener. Toronto, the city, should not be responsible solely for maintaining transportation arteries like that. No other municipality has to do that. So, upload them, get the job done. Now, is it a good idea or not? No, but it's a starting point for a conversation in terms of how to have that relationship. Bilow's experience as the housing czar, good generally, bit of a flop in terms of where are the shovels in the ground over the last 4 years. So yeah, she's got some warts. But in terms of posture and capability and temperament, probably among the 7 is the one that Toronto needs most to be mayor right now. So I would encourage you to take some time to go and look through who's out there. And for God's sake, if you are living in the 416, make sure Monday you vote. This is going to be one of the most important mayoral elections in the city's history. Period. And again, based on the power of incumbency, whoever gets elected Monday may well be the mayor well into the 2030s. It's a big decision, and it's a serious decision. So take responsibility for it. Make sure you're on the list. Get your ass out the door. Vote on Monday. All right. That'll do it for this edition of Now and Next. A little nasally still. Yeah, sorry about that. But here we go. And coming up, of course, tomorrow will be Feed Drop Thursday, and we will continue featuring the very first show we produced in Story Studio Network, which is The Next Normal. All of the learnings, well, in the moment, during COVID-19. And our panel sits around, and we actually predict, talk about, kick around the ideas and the opportunities that came up as a result of COVID-19 to build back better. That's tomorrow on Now and Next.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.